Today I'm talking about one of my favorite genres, family horror. I'm always searching, looking for horrors that take the genre to new heights. Stories that show us fears in our psyche we weren't even aware of. I'm desensitized to gore and find no enjoyment in jump scares. They're cheap, easy, hallmarks of popcorn movies. They offer little in the sense of real fear. The older I get, the more I find my fear is evolving from the disturbing. A guy coming at me with a knife is scary and all, but it's not revolting. It doesn't dig at my view of the world. Real dangers are able to be handled practically, whereas disturbing realities make you uncomfortable in your own mind. I stumbled upon an op-ed that succinctly illustrated my thoughts. The author, Emily Rice, decided to watch the new Invisible Man movie, only to become downright horrified at the domestic abuse portrayed. She was deeply disturbed, upset that there wasn't a trigger warning, and scrambled to turn the movie off. She goes on to say that she will be sticking to movies with a spooky mood and comforting jump scares. Emily was facing a real fear, a disturbing thought she couldn't confront. Now, movies are entertainment. Nobody should be forced to test their psyche, but it's something I willfully seek out. When I find a new subgenre that unsettles me, I become fascinated, deeply curious about it. The strange thing about The Johnsons is a short film I stumbled upon recently. It was made by Ari Aster, who brought us the wonderful Hereditary and Midsummer. The film disturbed me, in a way I never felt before, and the more I thought about it, the more the premise stewed in my mind and grew into horror. It led me down a road of trying to find more movies a part of a subgenre I'll be calling family horror. Let's break this genre down as we would a family unit. An example from the father, the mother, the child, and then the bloodline as a whole. If you've never seen this short film, I suggest you go watch it now. It's 30 minutes long and should definitely be viewed without any prior knowledge. But for those who, like Emily Rice, don't want to be put through such experiences, well, here's what you're missing. A dad accidentally walks in on his son masturbating. Both are embarrassed, but the dad makes an effort to console his son, assuring him it's a natural part of life. It's a heartwarming moment, but then it's revealed what the son was masturbating to, a picture of his dad. The strange thing about The Johnsons is a family horror about fatherhood, and what unravels is a parental nightmare. The father proceeds to be sexually abused by his own son. It's a tale of abuse flipped on its head. The father figure, who is usually shown as the perpetrator, is now the victim, and it gives the film an uncanny feeling. Sexual abuse is disturbing, but having it come from a child to a parent is so grotesque and so far from where our minds would ever stray that it's forcing you into new territories, making you confront feelings you were wildly unprepared for. We Need to Talk About Kevin is about motherhood. Ava, the mother, has her life changed drastically after a night of passion, and although she now has to give up the independent life she's enjoyed, it's expected that she will be rewarded with the joys of motherhood. Unfortunately, right from the start, Kevin makes this as difficult as possible. Kevin shows no affection, instead, outright hatred for his mother. His actions seem to be focused solely on tormenting her. For instance, in between Kevin's harmful interactions with Ava, he puts on these grandiose displays of affection towards his oblivious father, thereby emotionally isolating her. Ava's plight is very similar to that of Mr. Johnson's in Ari Aster's short. They are isolated by the cruelty of their own child, and left to suffer alone. The film climaxes in a bloodbath. Kevin murders his father, his younger sister, and a handful of students. Kevin spares his mother to once again torture her, to let her bear the weight of the tragedy alone and force her to question what role she played in the massacre. The film goes much deeper than proposing, what if your child was a psychopath? It proposes, if your child is a psychopath, how much of that is due to you? The movie has a creative way of getting you to equate Kevin and Ava as though they are one and the same, my favorite being the jam sandwiches they both enjoy, but it's also directly expressed.
Yeah, you can be kind of harsh sometimes.
You're one to talk.
Yeah, I am. Wonder where I got it.
Ava may be directly responsible for Kevin's actions solely because of the blood they share. And that poses a question to us, the viewer. Are you willing to risk genetically passing down the demons that plague you? For example, let's say you have major depressive disorder. If you have children and they inherit the same disorder, are you not responsible for their suffering? Kevin was never happy in his life, but he was brought into the world by Ava, and he resented it. It's a very uncomfortable examination of parenthood. Parents is a wonderful horror comedy from 1989. Well, wonderful to me. It follows Michael as his parents become increasingly suspicious and alien to him. When we're young, we know there's this secretive adult world, or we suspect there is. Our parents aren't exactly being honest with us, often skirting answers, and late at night, past our bedtime, things go on. Things we shouldn't know about. As a kid, it can be very scary. What are the parents doing? Why is it a secret? Is it something bad? Something I shouldn't know about? Parents takes this idea and runs with it, with the dark secret being cannibalism. Michael doesn't catch his parents having sex, he catches them in a cannibalistic orgy. Randy Quaid is phenomenal as this eerily calm father who seems always at the brink of losing his temper. When Michael learns his parents' dirty secret, his parents attempt to induct him into their traditions, becoming one of them.
You're an outsider. You're not like them. You're like us.
While this movie doesn't disturb me, I guarantee you it'd scare the hell out of a little kid. It's like the fear of being secretly adopted. You have moments when your parents seem so alien, so foreign. You wonder if you will ever fit in. And if you are truly different, will they ever accept you?
We're bound for life.
I always knew Flowers in the Attic was a popular book, but that's about it. Turns out it was a bestseller. The book was originally released as adult fiction, but for some reason in the 1980s, it was a craze among teenage girls, being the dirty little secret they hid from their parents. To capitalize off this, they made a movie, targeted at teenage girls. And I'm explaining all of this just to hammer home how bizarre it is then that Flowers in the Attic to me is the most disturbing, stomach-turning depiction of family horror I have ever seen. Lifetime went on to remake the movie and released 3 sequels following the books of V.C. Andrews, and those sequels do not diminish in grotesqueness. I've watched the original, the remake, and all the sequels, and it's an incredibly bizarre experience. The story, if read in summary, is horrific and terrifying, but in the movies and the book, it's juxtaposed against this flowery style that presents itself as an over-the-top soap opera, and it's surreal. I will briefly explain the plot of the book because, well, you can't beat the source material. Corinne and her 4 children, Kathy and Chris, the adolescents, and the young twins, Carrie and Corey, find out their dad has died. Corinne relied entirely on her husband for income, so she's forced to move back in with her estranged parents, Malcolm and Olivia. However, her parents have never forgiven her for whom she decided to marry, and consider the children abominations. In an effort to spare Malcolm the shame of their existence, Olivia locks the grandchildren in a room on the far side of the mansion. Olivia explains that if Malcolm ever came to know of their existence, Corinne would be written out of the will. The kids end up being imprisoned for years, and eventually realize their mother had no intention of ever letting them out. Corinne was going to start a new life with her inheritance, and was poisoning the children with arsenic. Surprisingly, that didn't bother me. That's pretty tame stuff. The real messed up part is why Olivia and Malcolm were angry at Corinne in the first place. Well, it turns out Corinne's husband, the children's father, was also her half-uncle, Malcolm's brother. Worse even still, Corinne and her husband had the same birth mother. They were siblings, which puts their shared DNA somewhere in the range of 50 to 75%. There's so much more to get to, but I want to take a second to just run you through how disturbing this is. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of some of the characters. Let's say you're Malcolm. You have a daughter who you love and cherish. Your father remarried and gave you a younger half-brother. He eventually comes to live with you, and you begin to feel a deep affection for him. He's your kid brother, after all. Then you find out he's been sleeping with your little girl. The amount of pain you'd feel is, to me, unimaginable. Let's say you're one of the children. You've just been told you are the product of incest. Imagine that. You, right now, you get a call and are told your mother and father are related. How insanely terrifying. From one study, 42% of children born from inbreeding are born with severe birth defects, and 11% are mentally impaired. Your risk of being born totally healthy is less than half. You'd be devastated, and anytime you couldn't figure out a problem or noticed a physical shortcoming, you'd be thinking, it's 'cause I'm inbred. Getting back to the story, things get dark. In one scene, Kathy catches Chris measuring his penis, and Chris confesses he's worried he's not as big as his father since he saw his dad naked. Kathy then admits she often thinks about how big her mother's breasts are, and this whole scene is handled so nonchalantly, like of course they think about their parents naked, who doesn't? But needing to kick the incest up a notch, Chris and Kathy begin to find themselves attracted to one another. This builds until Chris finally rapes Kathy, and in a sick turn of events, Kathy says she wanted it. They fall in love. In the sequels, Chris and Kathy actually end up together, living happily with kids, hiding their big secret from the world. The rape doesn't happen in the movies, but they do have sex in the 2004 remake. And instead of having an ominous score playing and dark lighting, you're watching this horrific event unfold like it's a scene in a sappy romance. It's profoundly disturbing how the movie is trying to trick you into viewing this as something beautiful, a forbidden love. It's a complete mindfuck. The uncanniness is really what escalates the terror for me. The sequels in the Lifetime V.C. Andrews TV movie universe continue with the soap opera vibe, but they become far more disturbing. As the movies examine the family's lineage, we find out that all members of the family deal with incestuous desires. It's their curse, or as the characters put it, their blood is tainted. This story is the ultimate horror trope thrown off the deep end. The trope is that your family harbors this dark secret that's passed down from generation to generation, and once you're old enough, you take up the legacy. Parents was following this exact trope. It's shown at the end that the grandparents were cannibals too. Treehouse of Horror 4 features a vampire skit where everyone but Lisa has been a vampire and she's expected to join. But in those cases, it's pretty goofy. They're fun comedies. Finding out you're destined to commit incest, to sleep with your family members, continue endless inbreeding is revolting. It's not fun horror. It's not playful like, what if I become a vampire? It's, what if I have to fuck my family? And that's truly revolting. Why are these movies affecting me this way? Why are they so disturbing? Well, Freud wrote an essay on the uncanny. He breaks down the etymology of the German equivalent unheimlich. Heimlich can mean home-like, but also private, hidden. Therefore, unheimlich is unhomelike and unhidden. Freud goes on to quote German philosopher Schelling's definition. Unheimlich is the name for everything that ought to have remained secret and hidden, but has come to light. Our lives are comfortable as long as they're home-like. Our family, those we live with, are at the center of that. If we discover a disturbing secret, we are likely to bury it in our subconscious. The desire to preserve our home, fend off the uncanny, is very strong. This is actually what the mother in The Strange Thing About the Johnsons does. But if that which is hidden does come to light and cannot be repressed, our world unravels. Family horror is turning the home unhomelike. Ari Aster actually references this in another one of his shorts.
You know what Freud says about the nature of horror? He says it's when the home becomes unhomelike.
Movies like Coraline, Goodnight Mommy, Society, they're all building their fear from the uncanny, making the familiar unfamiliar. And what's more familiar than family? These are all amplified by our strong cultural emphasis on family. In most movies or TV shows, it's the emotional core. And that makes sense, the family unit is the most important aspect of most people's lives, so it's usually depicted respectfully in media. Tainting the family unit is taboo. The most general audiences are able to handle is dysfunction, like in the Royal Tenenbaums or National Lampoon's Vacation. You'd be hard-pressed to find any father and son who want to sit down and watch The Strange Thing About the Johnsons together. That sounds like a nightmare. The world is an uncaring place, and especially in America, where safety nets are nearly non-existent and it's sink or swim, families are important to survival, to keep us afloat. Stories where our own family is the threat is not going to pass as entertainment for most people. That said, I'm left confused as to why incest is so popular. It seems that incest is everywhere on TV. I mean, Flowers in the Attic was a goddamn Lifetime movie. Why are women over 50 finding incest so palatable? Well, for one, upon doing my research, I found incest to be way more common than I ever would have guessed. Consensual and non-consensual incest is gravely underreported. There's no telling how rampant it is, but dear lord, there's even a subreddit for incestuous relationships. There is also a phenomenon surrounding adopted children known as genetic sexual attraction. It's when the adopted child is reunited with their biological family, and the child, mother, father, sister or brother, whoever, experiences a visceral erotic feeling with the reunited relative. However, I just don't think there's enough incestuous people out there to consider them a target audience. Freud would have given a far more disturbing explanation. That all of us suffer from unconscious incestuous desires, so incest on TV isn't disturbing most people, but fascinating them, allowing them to toy with a deep desire that's been declared taboo by society. And that right there, that thought, it shakes my worldview. It makes me feel extremely uncomfortable in my own mind. It's disturbing. But that's what makes family horror work for me. It pushes me into truly uncomfortable, unhome-like areas. In conclusion, I don't think family horror will hit the same for everyone. It's really going to boil down to how you feel about incest.